Alpine has set bold targets in both the development of its brand new 2023 Formula 1 car and what it wants to achieve this season. The car is always the star at an F1 launch, or at least it should be, and Alpine had two on display on Thursday night in London. Sadly, these were a pair of show cars, but the Renault works team has delivered more accurate renders and produced some technical goodness in another way. The highlight of the launch was the appearance of technical director Matt Harman, who talked through the areas of change of the car and gave us plenty to go on. Combine that with our own observations from the shots released of the car shaking down at Silverstone on Monday, and we have plenty to dig into. So let's bring our launch week analysis to a conclusion by assessing the new A523. If you've enjoyed our coverage of all the new cars, make sure you're subscribed to our channel to follow all the major stories from pre-season testing as well. At the end of last season, Alpine Formula 1 team boss Otmar Szafnauer set a clear target for 2023, stating, "We need to be closer to 3rd than 5th. For a team that edged out McLaren for 4th by just 14 points and was 342 points behind Mercedes in 3rd, this is a hugely ambitious target. But it's also the only acceptable aim that Alpine can set as F1's other works team, and was repeated extensively throughout the launch. So what's been done to achieve that? The car does feature some striking changes. The nose has changed structurally, which Harman said was to offer more freedom to change elements of the front wing, both in terms of speed and how the airflow is fed to the suspension behind. It's made the nose into a flatter design, which potentially has also allowed weight to be taken out of it. The front suspension is the same in concept with a pushrod geometry, but with changes to the kinematics, so that means effectively the way these interlinked parts move and interact has changed. As part of that, the wishbones have been repositioned. As Harman said, this is all about ensuring there is control of the airflow in terms of how much goes over the top of the floor and how much into the underfloor. The way the airflow coming off the front wing suspension and the rotating front wheel is managed and distributed is crucial to optimising the powerful ground effect underfloor. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the car is the deep gully running the length of the side pod that feeds airflow to the rear. That is a significant change from last year's design. But the rear of the car is clearly what Harman is most proud of. The rear suspension has been changed significantly, switching from a pull rod to a push rod design, and Harman described this as more simple but also significantly lighter. But the inboard suspension components, so the bits we can't see, have also been made more complex to give the team a wider range of setup tools to optimise the car, and all of this with a geometry that improves the control of the airflow through the suspension. Finally, Harman said an aggressive weight reduction program has been conducted. That has not only got the car down to the weight limit, but beyond it to allow the use of ballast to optimise weight distribution. Connected to that are tweaks to the cooling packaging to open up more space for aerodynamic gains. That includes not only changing the packaging of the cooling system, but making it smaller. This is one of the reasons why the whole side pod and engine cover package is visibly more compact. Harman also said that the plenum temperature for the engine has been reduced, which means a little more power as well as a reduction in cooling demands. If the car performs as well as last year or better, then one obvious area of improvement will make a big difference to Alpine's season. Its obvious Achilles heel in 2022 was reliability, and it prevented Alpine from finishing well clear of McLaren. Even with all the lost points, it would still have been a long way from the goal of being closer to 3rd, but the impact was big enough that curing reliability was the team's first goal for this season. Alpine's reliability problems with its 2022 engine were mainly rooted in auxiliary components, including one that caused a headache all season long, the water pump. Renault overhauled its power unit ahead of the engine freeze that kicked in last year, having had a performance deficit in recent seasons. That involved such a high workload and a late sign-off for the final 2022 design that Renault cut short the usual full validation process, willingly risking problems if it meant extra performance, because the engine freeze does allow changes to address reliability concerns. Though Alpine is adamant that paid off overall, it came at the cost of several race-ending or weekend-compromising problems over the course of the year, mostly on Fernando Alonso's car, as the two-time world champion repeatedly pointed out. Alpine's technical team reckons the gamble paid off because there were no major issues on the internal combustion engine itself, despite that being the focus of most change. The only notable exception was the strange double V6 failure at the Singapore Grand Prix, where both Alonso and Esteban Ocon retired within a few laps of each other with different problems. But there were obviously key things to address, and while some of the problems were with parts supplied by third parties, Alpine admitted late last year that it cannot make excuses because its validation process should have uncovered the issues. It's made an effort to be more diligent, and for 2023 the water and fuel pumps have been redesigned, while other reliability tweaks will inevitably have been made as well. Having the time to focus on specific items over the winter means Alpine has no excuses not to have addressed such a crucial element of its package. As an all-French lineup, the combination of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly looks like a dream on paper for a Renault-owned team. It is one of the most compelling and combustible dynamics on the 2023 grid. There was a time when Gasly and Ocon were very close as kids, and now there's a heavy emphasis on how great it is for two young French drivers who used to race karts together to now drive for France's only F1 team. It is a remarkable turn of events, but the personal connections aren't all good, as a falling out in their youth destroyed their relationship. The origins are never talked about publicly, but it's believed to be deep-rooted and goes beyond the drivers themselves and into their families. Alpine and the drivers have insisted this can all be controlled, and it's certainly fair to give them a chance to show that they are mature and professional enough to do that. But it would be naive and wrong to pretend the issue doesn't exist, and Alpine hasn't ignored the potential for fireworks. It took it into account in considering Gasly and talked about it with both drivers, even consulting with Ocon before pulling the trigger. That was sensible and probably essential, given Ocon's already been involved in some punchy teammate scraps in the past, notably with Sergio Perez at Force India, but with some high-profile run-ins with Alonso at Alpine too. Zafnauer even said at the end of 2022 that Ocon needs to be a better judge of when to race his teammate and how hard. Alpine will hope the past feud proves to be an outdated narrative, but it's not a trivial issue, which really puts extra emphasis on avoiding any early flashpoint between them. Given the circumstances, it might not be that difficult to set something off. The stakes are so high, and in F1 a driver's teammate is their first rival. There'll inevitably be a battle to assert themselves early on, especially as Alonso's exit means there is an opening to be Alpine's lead driver. Both Ocon and Gasly have said all the right things so far, including at the launch, and will probably do so again at testing and into the season itself, because it's inevitable they will keep being asked about this. Being forced together at Alpine and the passing of time might have eliminated any residual tensions, and they may never flare up again. It seems inevitable though that the rebuilt bridge between them will be stress tested at some point this year. But for now, Alpine's at least launched its car and season without any dramas. If you're looking for more to learn from launch week, check out our video on why a key part of Mercedes' car might change early in the season, or our look at the new Ferrari and the whispers of a very good winter at Maranello.